the Sounds True Podcast Network.
It just happened that I woke up one morning in my bed and I woke up into another world, into another state. And it was a world of light and a world of illumination where the light was just coursing through me and there was an intelligence to the light. And there was no fear in my system. It had just gone.
Welcome, friends. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, my guest is Richard Rudd. Richard is a teacher, mystic, and award-winning poet. He's best known for his work as the founder of the Gene Keys, which is a system that synthesizes wisdom from different traditions to help people unlock their highest potential. His primary residence is Devon, England, and he's a husband, a father, and someone I'm meeting here for the first time, and I have so much interest and curiosity. Friends, stay with us. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Tami. It's lovely to be here and also lovely to meet you.
In learning about your life story, what I learned was that early in your life, you were 29 years old, you had a major initiation, that would be my language, a major spiritual experience that you say informed the rest of your life. It included visions of the future, important memories from our collective past. And I want to start there and hear about what you experienced and what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, they're funny, these things, aren't they? These sort of epiphany events that some people have. And well, we all have them, I think, in different degrees. Yeah, it was, I think it was just, I guess it makes a good story, you know? And it did happen, but I don't know how it happened, and I wasn't doing anything to make it happen. But it just happened that I woke up one morning in my bed and I woke up into another world, into another state, and out of my sleep, I came into this other world, and it was a world of light and a world of illumination, and where the light was just coursing through me and there was an intelligence to the light, and there was no fear in my system. It had just gone. And I was, it was like a welcome to me. It was like, wow, this is very familiar, actually. And so it seemed, although it was extraordinary, it seemed familiar. And I kind of went with it, and not knowing what was going on. And I had 3 days like that, and 3 nights. I didn't really sleep, and I didn't eat much. I don't think I ate anything, actually. I just drank a lot of water. And in those 3 days and 3 nights, yeah, I had a lot of kind of cellular memories, and it's very hard to explain. So many layers of things kind of took place inside my being, and years later, I kind of look back at it and I think, now I understand. I was sort of, through one way of saying it is that I was sort of given a view through the future human. You know, so the human that was coming, that was going to evolve out of the current one, I kind of saw, I saw what it was like to see through the lens of that more advanced version of the one that we are now. And so that's how I've understood it, but I didn't understand it like that then. And then the experience just kind of washed off me at the end of the 3rd day, and I was just back to being good old Richard, slightly screwed up young man. And so, that was the experience, and it did sort of define my spiritual life and some of my spiritual seeking, and set me on a definite journey I was already on a journey, but it was difficult to integrate. Put it like that. It was. It took me probably a good 7 years, actually, I think, to integrate it. But it led to eventually what became the Gene Keys. But it wasn't. I didn't receive a download. It wasn't anything like that. Some people call them the download. It was just pure light, and the light had intelligence and memory. And when I say memory, I also can apply that forwards in time, which we often don't do with memory. We kind of assume it's back, but I kind of remembered things forward in time as well as backwards in time. So yeah.
Okay, well let's go into that a little bit more, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So, you said, well, lots of people have experiences, and yeah, lots of people do, but I don't talk to that many people, and I haven't heard that many people who have 3 days of an immersion in wakeful light and see a future vision of what humanity was. So I find this really unusual and really interesting. While this was happening, what were your reflections? Like, did you think, holy God, what the hell's gone on? Or were you not even reflecting? Like, what was going on for you in the midst of all this? Was there any of your sort of ordinary consciousness operating?
Yeah, I was sort of I was more functioning on a kind of mythic level. So, my ordinary consciousness had kind of gone to this mythic framework where memories were coming to me in a sort of mythic way, and I was out and about, right? So I had a car, and I was listening to where the energy wanted to go and what it wanted to do. And at times I had some notebooks, and I filled the notebooks in like a couple of hours. I just filled them with just reams of stuff and drawings and diagrams. I still have the notebooks, actually. and I look at them sometimes, and I'm like, what? I still don't understand some of that. And then I was in the car, and I was driving, and one of the things I ended up doing is I went to a wedding. It wasn't a wedding that I had been invited to, but I stumbled across it, and I became one of the audience. And I sort of understood, while I was at that wedding, everything there was about marriage and sacred marriage and the yin and the yang, and everything had a mythic understanding. So everything that happened to me had a sort of mythic framework around it that was teaching me. So I had a sort of accelerated learning about archetypal consciousness. And so many strange things happened to me. I mean, just from doing this, just from following this impulse inside me. I traveled throughout England. I was in Glastonbury for a bit, and then because I was in the south part of the country, and then I was near Stonehenge, and I was sort of following these threads of ancient footprints and just all kinds of woven layers of the past were kind of moving through me, and as I said, memories, and sort of kind of tastes of mythic beings. So yeah, it was very it was otherworldly, even though I was sort of here and I was talking to people and interacting with strangers and just constantly learning. Yeah.
Memories of the future human. Tell me more about that.
Well, that I didn't realize till much later. Because I came out of that experience and back into this reality, and as I said, I sort of had to go through a lot of struggling of understanding what that, whether that was even real, actually. And sort of, if you went to some of the Buddhists, they might say, "Oh, it's just an illusion. Those are just illusions. You let them go, just like anything else." And I kind of understand that as well. So I try not to set too much store in it, but it creates a good introduction to the story of what then later became Gene Keys. But yeah, so I was unraveling this, later I guess I used the algorithm, the allegory now of the dragonfly, the life cycle of the dragonfly. And I have it a lot on my books, my Gene Keys books, they have dragonflies on them. And it's a good allegory of the future human, because the like a butterfly, the dragonfly lives in one state of consciousness. It's an underwater predator, a creature that lives under the water, for 2 or 3 years. And then one day it suddenly kind of goes up a stalk of grass or a reed, and it goes out into the light, leaves its watery environment that's never done that before. It's never left the water and gone into the air. And then within about 2 or 3 hours, it's broken itself open, and this flying iridescent insect emerges, amazing dragon. And so in a way, what I experienced, what I now look back on, I experienced the view through that dragonfly. If you see that as an allegorical way, it's like that's what the view looks like through the future us. The future us sees things outside, sees through time and space, and experiences the pure light of consciousness and grace and memories of all of our lives and all of our existence, and the omniscient mind of the divine that kind of can see through us, and the I think more powerful than anything, the absence of fear from the body. So no fear in the body at all. And that's the weirdest feeling. I don't know if anyone listening to this, through whatever reason, has ever come to that state, or you yourself, Tami, but just, there was all tension, just because fear creates a subtle background tension. And I can feel it in my body even now, like very subtle if I tune into it, and it's just there. But it completely left. So I had that view of like, wow, that's what it's like without any fear at all. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely overwhelmingly beautiful and loving.
Richard, I'm mostly aware of the presence of fear in the body versus the absence of fear. And I think we'll talk more about that and the transformational process. But here, you and I are just getting to know each other. But I'm just going to come out right here and be very real with you. I'm not familiar with the gene keys. I only became familiar with them in preparing for this conversation. So I have a very beginner's mind about it. I have talked to lots of people about awakening and how through that there's a vision of our collective awakening. And I also hear a voice inside of me that says, look, Tami, individuals have had these kinds of breakthroughs throughout history. Turning that into something that's going to be the new future human for the species. Come on, stop it. Look around. And to be honest with you, and this is where getting to know each other, I have both of these voices inside of me. And so, once you go inside my world, there's a lot going on. And so there's a part of me deep in my heart that believes in this evolutionary possibility for the human species. I sense it. I know it even. And yet I have a disbelieving voice as well that says, in what millennium might this occur? And perhaps it won't. So how do you weigh in here as we're talking about this?
Yeah, well, I have to say I'm absolutely with you 100%, because when you look outside in the world and you see our behavior, and you don't have, you can't quite conceive that anything like that could be possible for the species, right? But then what I would do is like look at the allegory of the dragonfly, right? When you're down under the water in that watery realm, you can't even imagine how that creature could transform from being this horizontal plane thing to this multidimensional vertical other thing. But if you think about the evolution, if you think even about the timescales involved, 3 years underwater, 3 hours going up a stalk, and then, minutes before it, as it takes to the air. That's how quick transformation can occur and does occur, because that's the evidence right there. That's how quick it is, and so we never know when a quantum leap is coming. And I'm not one of these kind of hopefuls. I am a realist, and I'm a father, and I'm a very ordinary, grounded man, despite anything you've just heard. And I'm just a family man, really. And I kind of, so I look at the world as it is and I see it, but I also have watched these patterns for years now. And I also am armed with this technology called the gene keys, which is incredible. And it really accurately depicts algorithms and timings and like living algorithms that live inside us as humans, but also kind of dictate the flow of our kind of trajectory. And so one of the things that I kind of see is, and I've learned a lot, like one of the things I've learned from systems theory, for example, is that when a system is getting ready to go through a major transition, there are signs before that happens, right? And those signs, the physicists and people, they call them strange attractors, right? There's a thing called strange attractors, and strange attractors are unforeseen events that are not linear in any way. They come in suddenly from the side and they take everyone by surprise, and they kind of reroute the direction of things. And when a system's about to change, you get more of these. You can't say what they're going to be or what they're going to do, but what they do know is that more of them appear. So you could say that the pandemic was one of those. You might even say Donald Trump is one of those, a strange attractor, right? Anything that comes in that you were not expecting, and that stirs things up. And I'm not saying they're good or bad. There's no value added to it. It's just we're going to see more of them, and they create more disturbance and more ripples. And they are evidence of a declining paradigm, right? And that it's in that backdrop that you kind of see early shoots of spring appearing, right? So I'm kind of realistic. And many people kind of wish that it would be very soon, and they ask, when's this going to happen? And I just say, well, it's going to take hundreds of years, but hundreds of years is not long. And it's here now. It's actually here, like mycelium under the ground. So we are perhaps in the process of going up the stalk, our species. And so we don't really, and when you go up the stalk into the light, you don't really know what you're doing or why you're doing it. And it's terrifying because you're leaving what you've known, and the known starts to decline and fall away. And the old paradigm, everywhere you look, you see it declining. You see the social fabric declining. You see the, reality itself just sort of falling away. And so fear increases hugely. And I've sort of, that's what I've continuously sort of been monitoring. So I think if you're very tuned in, then you can start to see the very first buds of this new consciousness. But it's very subtle and it's quite inward inside us. Just as the first little buds pushing up through the dark of winter, there's always a few early ones, but that spring's still quite a long way away, but that the power of spring is under there. And so that's how I frame this phase that we're in now. And so what it does is it brings a huge amount of hope. But it's not sort of hope like false hope. For me, it's certainty. But I do my best to convey that certainty. For me, it's a cellular certainty because I felt it and I know it. Knowing is a thing, right? Memory, you can't argue with memory. Like when you remember something, it's something that takes place in the cells of your body. So I remembered it. And once you've remembered it, you can't unremember it. It's like, and so I know it's coming. I don't know when, but I sense its arrival. And I have the algorithm system, which I was also given, not me alone, many others have used it. And it's used by other people, and it's a similar system to human design in some respects, where people are it's another tool, personal tool, gene keys. but it allows you to look at patterns and then extrapolate from those patterns and get a sense of when things are coming. And so gene keys, and if anyone comes in new to the gene keys like you, like one of the first things that you might come into touch with is there's a sort of prophecy woven into it. So even though it's a sort of technology of consciousness, right in the heart of it is this prophecy that kind of is around this time, and particularly 2026 and 2027 as it happens. I mean, 30 years since I had my experience, and so I've sort of been waiting for this time, not waiting kind of, excitedly. I've just it's here now. And I'm not saying that everything's going to suddenly change, but I do think these next few years we will experience a ramping up of fear, because we're in the time of strange attractors, and that means that there are more chaotic forces around, and I think people are feeling it. And I want to give the perspective that there's something else going on under the fear, under the surface, and it's something quite beautiful and remarkable. And not that we should set hope in it and just go, oh, well, it's all going to be fine then. Not at all. But it does change things when you take that view. Does that make sense?
What you're saying makes sense. I want to make sure that it's clear to me and to our listeners, which is you use the word certainty. Certainty of what? Like, I get the allegory of the dragonfly, but I'm also like trying to put myself now into the dragonfly's consciousness. It's flying. What does that mean with certainty for me as a human?
It's the cellular certainty that, there is something hidden inside every human being, a higher species, a higher being, and it's actually a genetic thing. It requires a series, just as the dragonfly. The dragonfly has to go through a series of genetic mutations, molts they're called, and most of them are invisible. They take place under the water, and you don't see it. There's no sign. There's no outer signs of it, but it goes through this process inside, and then it culminates in a huge, transmutation where its behavior shifts. And so what we're seeing, what's certain, is that the human behavior is going to shift from the inside out. So it doesn't mean that we're suddenly all going to be loving and kind and stuff, but it does mean that there's an awakening that's taking place deep inside human beings, humanity itself, and that it's beginning to pop up in the first flowers of spring. So more and more people are beginning to experience little glimmers of it as it begins to pop up and open. So that's what I mean by the certainty. The certainty is that awakening is baked into every human being alive. It's because it's the truth of who we are. And as you said, the great mystics through time and space have known it, and many of us have glimpsed it in kind of moments, or if we took plant medicine or whatever we did, or we went to deep meditation, or maybe it just happened as a freak event like mine, and you just came into touch with it for a moment. So it's there, and its time is coming, like a wave, and the outer things that we're seeing are part of it coming, because you have to have a decline.
When you use this phrase, cellular certainty, and you talk about genetic mutation, what I notice is two things, and I'd love to hear your response, which is, one, I think to myself, I don't really know what Richard's pointing to. Like, what is the mutation that is happening at a genetic level to human beings, like the dragonfly? Like, what's physically happening? That's one thing. I'm just curious. And then the other thing that happens, though, is I get extraordinarily excited. Like, I can feel what you're saying. Like, when I tune in cellularly, I think, I kind of get it. But I don't even know what I'm getting. But I get very excited and open and free. And I'm like, oh, something's happening physically. But help me here, Richard, understand your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a geneticist or a scientist, so I'm a poet, right? So through me, you have a poetic view of reality and DNA. So the gene keys is nothing but that. This is not a pseudoscience. It's a poetic version of DNA, right? And it's
okay.
rooted.
Well, that's good. So I can go with the poetry. So that's helpful.
Yeah. So you don't need to kind of worry about, and I know some science, of course, and I love talking to scientists and mathematicians and things, because I do have that kind of brain that I think the experience I had has helped me to understand the fractal nature of the universe, and so I have an affinity to those things and to discoveries that science are making, and but I am essentially a more right-brained kind of being.
Physically,
what's actually happening physically? Yes, some kind of genetic mutation that is changing the equipment, and I can't prove that. One thing I have, you can see things like the neurodiversity that we're experiencing more, and things like autism and some of the gifts that are emerging through those children or people who are kind of accessing those network levels of consciousness now, which I mean, I don't know if you're readers.
hosts of conversations, like podcasts, like things like Insights at the Edge, exploring their own neurodivergence. Yes, exactly.
So
it's happening all the time.
These are signs of the interconnectedness of consciousness, and of course, we can see it as a metaphor outside through the internet and AI, and that's almost an outer kind of expression of what's going on the inside in some way, that we're kind of accessing our higher intelligence, or we're just on the cusp of it. So that it is a very exciting time and a very frightening time at the same time.
When you talk about the prophecy that's at the center of the gene keys, and you're talking about hundreds of years from now, this journey through our mutation to, it's like I can kind of follow that and go, yeah. When you talk about something's going to be happening in 2026, 2027, that this is a critical time, and now this time is here 30 years after. I think to myself, well, I can just look at my watch now and see if this comes to be. What exactly do you think is going to be happening in the near future?
It's something intangible. I mean, it might have physical manifestations, who knows, but it's something kind of intangible. It's the death of an old cycle, right? It's the decline of an old cycle. So if you look at the sort of measuring system of the gene keys, which uses quite mathematical ways of tracking global cycles, one of the things you see is that it's sort of every 450 years or so, a cycle shifts, and it's like a kind of cogs and gears mechanism. And then when it shifts, the old cycle declines. It might be a civilization, it might be an empire, it might be lots of things. And it declines quite quickly, and something new appears. A new phase of history appears. And there are also larger cycles, outside that. And the one that ends in 2027 is part of a much longer cycle. So it doesn't mean that everything suddenly changes. It means that what it does mean, like next year, 2026, I sort of given it the pet name of the year of the closing door, because the door is closing on that old cycle. And when it's closed, it's like a super tanker that's run out of fuel. It's got no fuel left in it, which means it might drift on for a bit under its own steam, but then it literally begins a rapid decline. So that's what this time is pointing to. It's like the death of an old cycle. So I don't know what that looks like. I mean, I imagine if that were enacted out as a metaphor, it might mean that the planet could go through an energy crisis, for example, because the energy that was available for the last 450 years or so, and going back further, but especially the last cycle, that's where we've built these, this civilization, this interconnected civilization all around the world, this global culture, all the good stuff and the bad stuff, that the energy for that is being taken away. And so this is what I was saying about, we have a very linear view of history, because when we look, and not just the view, but the feel, because we've got all that momentum in us of everything we've built, and everything we've been part of, and the culture. And then when that, the last thing we think is going to happen is that that's going to be taken away, because we have a linear view. So we assume, well, AI will come, and then we'll get more advanced, and then we'll kind of get there, and then we'll go to Mars, and then technology will take us even further. And we don't, that's what we project based on the curvature of where we've come from. And these cycles don't operate like that. It's a split from one cycle to another. So what you get is these strange attractor events towards the end that change the trajectory. And it means that you thought it was going this way, but it won't. So it won't go the way you expect. So the whole civilization, at the moment, it's like, it's poised between cycles. And we're thinking it's going one way. There are certain people that don't think that, even quite intelligent. In fact, if you ask AI, interestingly enough, what are the chances of AI ever kind of getting to the place where we think it's going to solve everything? AI will tell you it's not very hopeful because of human behavior. Because of our behavior, we learn through our huge mistakes and from not listening. And so we kind of create these calamities. And AI itself, right, is actually part of that story. So the very thing that we think is going to save us is probably one of the agents that will not destroy us, but speed up the decline of the civilization that we've built, right? And all the systems that we've built that are kind of built on something that isn't, sustainable anyway. And that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, it means we can put all our energy into the new. So it's an incredibly exciting time. I actually foresee a creative renaissance coming now, because there's all this creative energy for new ideas and new projects, but they're outside the old paradigm. And it's tricky because you have to sort of kind of break with the way it has been and kind of start to use a more visionary understanding of, okay, what can we do? What should we be doing? Where can we put our energy? And so what you see things like people returning to the land and learning how to make food again, and localized, decentralized networks of kind of culture that are more resilient, because we're going to go through a period of decline as a planet. But at the same time, you can see this growth of this new creature, this new being, and it'll need new networks and a new kind of world. So I'm not a utopian. I kind of follow and track all the patterns, but I do see that there's a massive opportunity for something new. But I think it's discontinuous with the old, just as the dragonfly is. It's discontinuous with the old. It's of a different dimension. One's a flying insect.
I hear you. So I hear you. So I love the poetry of the year of the closing door for 2026. Do you have a headline for 2027?
I don't know. I mean, it's like someone asked me the other day, like, what why would, if this is going to happen, why would a child come and be born now? If it was an incarnation, like, why would it choose to come in at this point? I said, well, they must be big wave surfers. They must be specialized beings, because I think it's it's the year of the big wave or something. I haven't given that its name, but It's something like that. It's the
Okay,
year
very
of,
good. I'm going to keep asking you some hard questions here because
please.
as I was starting to familiarize myself with the gene keys, I was like, okay, so it's a combination of the I Ching, I get it, our genetic code. I'm not familiar with human design, but that's clearly foundational here.
Yeah.
It involves my birth date and astrology.
Yeah.
It's drawing on other wisdom traditions as well. Now we're talking about sacred mathematics. And I was like, okay, Richard, give me the elevator pitch,
Yeah.
if you will, or condensation. I'm in
Yeah.
the elevator with you.
Sure.
We're only going to go up a few floors, whatever. What are the gene keys?
Sure. System of personal transformation rooted in the healing of our shadow patterns and the transforming of them into gifts, and that's really it. So it begins with the problems that inside us and our trauma, and it's about facing and accepting our trauma and forgiving and letting go, and then discovering that inside our traumas specifically are very powerful gifts, and they give rise to our true purpose in life. So that's really the process in an elevator pitch.
Okay. And then we mentioned the idea of being free of fear, having an absence of fear in the body, and that most of us, and I said, look, I'm aware of the fear that lives in me in this way and that way, etc.
Yeah.
How would the Gene Keys approach help us work with our physical body of fear that manifests in, many different ways?
Yeah. So there's a very simple single technique at the core of the Gene Keys, and I wrote a little book about it called The Art of Contemplation. It's like under 100 pages. It's what I would give to, I wrote the book because my father didn't understand what I did when he was alive. And he just, I don't understand this big book on the
We're
Gene
always trying to get our parents to understand what we're doing.
Yeah, so he had no idea. He said, I don't understand this big thing on Gene Keys, any of it. All right, so I said, okay, I'll put something together for you. And I wrote this very short book on contemplation, which he really liked, actually. He was a, interesting man. And it's the contemplation is the technique. And it's about creating a space around our fear, around our shadow patterns, around our traumas. And it's about really having the courage to look at those patterns. And the Gene Keys give you a language. So out of that chart, that profile that you can get for free on genekeys.com, anyone can do it now while I'm talking, go genekeys.com, free profile. And what you'll see, you'll get lots of words. And you'll see nasty sounding words, and you'll see lovely sounding words, and they're all kind of layered over each other. And so the nasty ones, the shadows, are patterns they're victim patterns that we've inherited. They're archetypal. This is an archetypal system, right? And as you said, it's rooted in the I Ching. So there are 64 of these patterns, 64 different shadow patterns. I'll give you an example. One of the shadows is called the shadow of corruption. Right, so they're patterns throughout humanity, as well as being patterns that are embedded in us in our biology. So it doesn't mean that if you have the shadow of corruption that you're a corrupt person, but it means that there's always a corruption of truth at the shadow level, at that frequency of being, and it does manifest socially as corruption, but it also means that if you have that particular key, you probably will have to deal with corruption in your life in some form or another. Maybe you marry someone, or you get attracted to it, or so this stuff happens to you. Maybe you become a police officer, who knows? But it's in your dharma somewhere. And so you get to learn and heal through it, but it's something embedded inside you. And then inside that corruption is a gift. Right, and what's the gift? It's the gift of equilibrium, and the equilibrium is like when you have kind of managed yourself through the shadow, and the shadow is always a victim state. It's always a part of us that gives up, or it's a depressive part, or it's it's a part that blames someone else, or blames the government, or it likes to not take responsibility for itself. So as we start to take responsibility for our own patterns, that's when the gift comes and we achieve a different level of equilibrium. It doesn't mean we get rid of the shadow. It means we kind of start to manifest the gift level. So there are 64 of these gifts and 64 of these shadows. So conflict is another one, right? You might have conflict, the shadow of conflict. And so that shows up in your relationships, probably. It does it for most of us. But if you specifically have that one, you're going to meet a lot of conflict all around you through your relationships. But the gift in that conflict is the gift of diplomacy. So you're going to be trained in the art of diplomacy. And contemplation is how you put that into practice. You contemplate your gene keys over time, and you don't just think about them. It might start with thinking about them, but then you feel your way into them. You kind of saturate yourself in them. And it's an ongoing process. It's not something that just suddenly happens. You don't get it in a weekend workshop. Gene keys takes time. Contemplation takes time. It's deep material about you. You're going to be contemplating this shadow for a while until you see it in your life. You're going to see it. You're going to witness it in your relationships. It'll come reflected. The moment you put your attention on it, it will start appearing everywhere. And then you can start to come to terms with it, and you can start to kind of heal yourself, and you can start to experience breakthroughs and epiphanies and transformations. And that's why I say Gene Keys is a system of transformations. It's gritty, though, because it starts with the shadow. It starts with difficulty. It starts with difficult words that we don't like to attach to ourselves. And you have to look at them and think of yourself through that lens, and then you start to see it, and you're like, it's my blind spot. I know it is. I see it now. And then out of that comes these gifts. And there's a third layer, which is called the siddhi. Siddhi is a Sanskrit word meaning a divine attribute. And there's 64 of those as well, a siddhi. So if you took, conflict and diplomacy, the siddhi of that one would be peace. So peace is hidden in conflict. It's interesting. So every shadow has a siddhi, has a higher essence hidden in it, and it's the reason for suffering, actually. So your gene keys show you how your suffering is layered into you. So in that sense, it's akin to many ancient teachings or shamanic, where you go down into the underworld, or the Buddhist teaching of suffering, where you go inside and you really meet yourself, and you meet your less kind of nice parts, and then you begin to get to know them. And as you get to know them, they start to transform into these gifts, creative gifts. And eventually, over a long period of time, they'll start to flower into the siddhis, into these higher forms. But that might take a long time. It depends.
Would you be willing, Richard, to give me an example from your own life of a shadow pattern and the contemplation you engaged in? Because I think a lot of times when you hear a word like contemplation, you think, okay, I'm going to think about this thing. Yeah. How is it going to actually change? How am I getting to the core of it such that it's turning into a gift and then a siddhi? But I think if you used a personal example, that would be interesting.
Before I do that, I'll just say that the gene keys are they're a sort of neuro-linguistic programming language that reflects the mathematics of our DNA. So DNA is made up of 64 structures, right? And there's 64 keys, and it's rooted in the I Ching, which is made up of these different 6 lines and combinations. So the geometry and the structure of the I Ching is exactly the same structure as DNA. Exactly. There are books written on this by geneticists, right? It's an incredible thing, but it's also true. So the language of the gene keys is coded archetypally to match that. So it really resonates at a very physical level. And I was a body worker for years. Before I got into any of this stuff, I was a body worker. My specialty was the belly. I worked on bellies. I worked on people's traumas. I helped them release patterns from very deep within their biomes. And so I'm not the head guy that you might think I am. I'm actually a very physical person. And so it contemplation, I've learned, is a very physical experience, but it has layers to it. So an example from my life is I have the key of doubt, right? Very key, very sort of in a really kind of important place. And so I had that experience, and then I had a huge amount of doubt come into my life of like, well, who are you? You're nothing. You're no one. You don't know anything. You don't know this stuff. You're like, it's like I lived with that doubt, that self-doubt for years. And I didn't want to say anything. I tried to go into denial. I reacted to the doubt at different times in different ways. It was very uncomfortable. Doubt's a horrible thing to live with. It's deeply, undermining, and it makes you feel bad about yourself and weak and, self-judgmental and all kinds of like constriction right in the body. So it's a constriction energy. All the shadows are constriction energies. And then the gift of doubt is inquiry, right? And you could take any gene key and it's the same story. So there's 64 of them, but it's the same story, just through slightly different lens. And the story is, you have to have the courage to inquire into the shadow. So you have to have the courage to look into the doubt. So I had to look into that doubt and go, well, first of all, it feels awful because I just feel bad. I feel afraid. I just, it doesn't make me feel good at all. And when I close my eyes or I try and meditate, it's just there. It's not. I can't even call it doubt. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling of deep unease in my body. And so as I realized that doubt in layers over the years, I started to talk about it, and I started to share about it, and I started to admit that I had this doubt, and I started to be vulnerable and just go, well, I don't know. One part of me just feels really super clear, and then the other part is just like this mind that's like, nah, you know nothing. You can't say that. You can't go out and tell people that you're a prophet. Don't be ridiculous. You're just your ego, vain, spiritual vanity, and all of that stuff. And I have a very kind of, I can be mean with myself. So over the years, I've learned to go much easier on myself, and the inquiry has softened me hugely, so that I'm no longer judgmental towards myself. And now I give myself, I like treat myself like a parent would treat a kind of wounded child. There's a part of me that just understands that doubt might be there, and and every now and again it might flare up again. But it's sort of, I don't know. It's no longer part of who I am. It was just stuff. It was fear. It was, and underneath it is this beautiful kind of flower. And that gift of inquiry led to me creating the gene keys. So it's because of my doubt that I figured out a way out of the doubt. And along the way, I built a system so that other people could also help figure their way out. But they're going to take different routes, because there's all kinds of the gene keys. Every gene key is a ladder, and so you can your ladder might look different from mine. And eventually the siddhi, the highest aspect of that is truth. So it goes doubt, inquiry, truth. And truth is in the cells. Truth is not about fact or anything, like facts can be taken away and changed. Truth is truth, right? And one of the things you realize from truth, from the view of the highest, the siddhi, is that even doubt is truth. So it's like the perfection of when you get to that heightened state, that transcendent state, it's not actually really, doesn't really feel transcendent. It just feels really self-loving and self-accepting. And that's the process that I've been in for years. And now I realize that contemplation is a really, really powerful tool for anyone. Because, it might start with thinking, but then it goes deeper and deeper, and then it becomes feeling. And then it goes deeper and deeper. And what it does, it starts to open us up to, to epiphanies, to breakthroughs, to, and eventually the contemplation becomes so deep as a state that you're living in that it becomes physical. So you actually your whole body enters a state of contemplation, and you're not even doing it consciously. it's a hard thing to explain, but because it's one of those techniques that you kind of, it isn't really a technique. And everyone is so obsessed with techniques today that they want, like, how do I do that? And actually, it's something it's a sense of gentleness, it's a sense of patience, it's a sense of ease. In the little book I wrote, I kind of give lots of exercises at the back. I say, look, it's like the contemplative way to walk is to meander. The contemplative way to think or to dialogue is to sort of to talk without kind of having a direction. It's about bringing the essence of a relaxed, easeful way into everything you do. And it doesn't mean you can't be sort of have good boundaries and all those things, but it's a very yielding kind of state of consciousness that then eventually comes into your mind, and you become incredibly lucid. So it's it's an equivalent to meditation. It's much easier than meditation. It's less kind of boring than mindfulness, if you don't mind me saying that. It's more creative. It's more fun, and it's easier.
I'm with you on the fun and the creative. The fact that it's easier than meditation, I might question that. But maybe that's only because I haven't gotten the hang of it yet.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me that what's required, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's part of what really inspired me as I was exploring your writing on contemplation, is this acceptance of whatever the shadow patterning is, a willingness to be like, oh, that's okay. That's okay. I can be gentle with this. And I wonder if you can say more about that. One of the quotes I pulled is, awakening is a series of softenings. And I really liked that, the softening.
Yeah, that's exactly what contemplation does. It takes away all the hard edges. You start probably being quite hard and edgy, because most of us do, because that's the shadow. And then as you lower yourself into this view, this worldview of contemplation, those edges become softer. And and the thing about it, I mean, I think meditation is an amazing path. It was designed not for modern humans. It was designed for monks and nuns in monasteries. And you can do it. You can do it every morning, and then you can go to work, and then you can do it in the evening, or you can do it in between. And contemplation is designed for the gaps between everything in life. So it's all about pausing, really. It's about I call it harvesting pauses. So if anyone's listening to this and they want to know how to contemplate, you can do it today, right? And all you have to do is find one pause today or tomorrow that you normally would not have taken, right? And so, if you can do that, then you've made a start. And a pause can be an in-breath. It can be as short as an in-breath and a sigh, or it can be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It can be putting your feet up. It can be going for a run. It can be doing something that's slightly, it's not of the left brain. You can have a moving pause.
But let me ask you a question about this, Richard, because I was reviewing some of your work on the art of contemplation, and pausing's the first step. And I thought, most people get that, actually, believe it or not, I think, and do that. But the harder part, and the reason I said I think it's hard, is that you then talk about the second step, if I understand correctly, of pivoting.
Yeah.
And that part, as part of contemplation, turning difficult situations into a gift, approaching challenges with an open heart. I thought that's what we don't do in general. We pause. Yeah. I'm just speaking now in, a big broad brushstroke. Okay, great. I paused. I went on a run. I stopped. I drank my tea, and I thought about all the things that are screwed up about this situation in my life. And I thought I was pausing and contemplating. That's not pivoting. You're talking about something else.
No. It requires a lot of patience, contemplation. If you understand its essence, it's a long-term view, right? So you don't put yourself on one of the first things you have to see is where we put ourselves under pressure. And one of the beauties of the second stage of contemplation, as you said, pivoting, is that we don't make it happen. It just happens in one of the pauses. But unless we're taking conscious pauses and we are delighting in them, we don't have those pivotal experiences. Usually a pivotal experiences is where we finally come into touch with some aspect of our own shadow, and we have a little revelation, or it might be a big revelation, or it might be something that someone says, or it might be, an animal coming up to us, or it might be a moment of magic, or something that we're not expecting. But it happens in a pause, and then it triggers that little awakening samadhi inside us. So if you are genuinely kind of entering into the spirit of contemplation, then sooner or later you will start to have more pivotal experiences, but especially understanding that you're not going to make them happen because they're not conscious. They don't consciously occur. They occur unconsciously. They occur from, it's like we have the default mode network in the brain, which is the part of the brain that needs to daydream. And if we don't allow ourselves to daydream and drift or meander or saunter or linger, we don't do those things, that part of our brain can't access the deep wisdom of the body, because the wisdom's in the body. And it's like Gene Keys is a wisdom system. It's not a knowledge system. I mean, people think it's a knowledge system, and they often approach it like a knowledge system, thinking they're going to get knowledge back out of it. But it's not. It's a triggering system to trigger the wisdom in the body. And so the wisdom's in us, as opposed to the knowledge. Knowledge is something you take in or you put in, whereas wisdom is like, it has to be triggered so that it can emerge from inside out. It's a yin practice. Contemplation is a yin practice. It is the most yin. And so you have to be really patient, and then sooner or later, you will start having these pivotal experiences. And it's like if you come to the Gene Keys community, right? There's thousands of us all around the world, right? Doing these crazy things, looking at and, contemplating. If you come into one of those forums or whatever, and you talk, and you hear someone talking, they will say, look, my first breakthrough came when this happened. And once you've had your first kind of big breakthrough, you kind of get it. You're like, oh, bloody, I get it. It's like this stuff works. It just works from the inside out. It's like, we have to sort of trick our strategic mind into kind of doing something that's not logical. It's a technique that isn't a technique, but it's been used for centuries and millennia by different people. So it's something that comes actually quite naturally to us, and it's not so natural in our modern world because of the way we're conditioned, because of our technology and social media and our kind of crazy binary world that we live in, where every moment is numbered. But once we start to break out of that, then we have these epiphanies, these moments, and that's when the magic starts to occur. And then you start finding that you pause more often. And it doesn't mean you become it doesn't mean you're doing less. It just means you're doing everything slightly differently in a slightly more yielding, soft-hearted manner. You become softer. Not, you still have a sword when you need it, but you just become a more yielding being. Does that make sense?
I still have a question, which is, I think in the pausing.
Thought you might.
In the pausing, there's this, okay, what's the hack I do now? And, I'm not a big fan of the word hack, but still, like, what's the thing I do now? Do I ask this question? I'm going to transform the shadow into a gift. Is there a set of things no, I'm supposed to be patient, gentle, and be in the pause, and something is going to emerge that's like a pivoting perspective, and I just wait for that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. It's not, like the word hack does not go with contemplation, right? It's like, it's the opposite of hacking. It's the softest way, like, and therefore it's the quickest, because you can't, the strategic mind can't get in there and do something. I mean, part of the trick of the gene keys, because it's all just a trick. It's a hall of mirrors. It's a system. It's made up. Any system is a trick to trick you, to trick your strategic mind into relaxing, so that something opens up inside you, and then you come into tune with your inner nature. All systems, I'm sorry to say, are tricks, and gene keys the same. So it tricks your mind into sort of trying to unravel a shadow and think about it and understand it. And then the gift sounds good. That kind of, I'd like to feel that. And the city sounds really out there. How am I going to get to ecstasy, but it's about opening up to the worldview and the possibility that, wow, actually, what if I were ecstatic? What would that feel like? What would that look like? How different would my life kind of be? And what would I do? Would I do anything if I experienced natural ecstasy? Does anyone have that? I've heard that maybe it happens. And so maybe one of the things you do in your contemplation is you start following these intuitive signals. So you might be like, well, I've got ecstasy. And you start reading about Anandamayi or someone, like one of these great saints who fell into ecstasy. And you're like, wow. And you start to resonate with your own energy field, and you find your way into that. And then you kind of bypass the need to actually try and do something, and it just happens on its own. It's a difficult thing to explain, but it does just happen on its own. But you do have to do the pausing part.
So just a couple more questions here. The path of gentle transformation, that's one of the ways you refer to the Gene Keys approach. And you mentioned these 4 different attitudes and approaches that are part of that: patience, gentleness, contemplation, and inquiry. And I feel like we've done a good job touching, at least pointing in the direction of patience, gentleness, and contemplation. I'm curious about the inquiry part, because I want to do something. So I want to inquire, at least in a Gene Keys-like way. What do you suggest for inquiry?
Well, that's the beauty of the Gene Keys. It's a system of inquiry. I remember I told you my gift was inquiry. So, it's an invitation to inquire into what makes you tick. So you get your profile, you look at the Gene Keys, you start to inquire, you start to read, you start to listen. I mean, I've laid out a lot of poetry and a lot of ideas and stuff. So it's like it starts to saturate you, the frequency of the teaching. It's a sort of transmission, and then you come into it, and it just keeps reminding you of who you really are. Not, I say to people, look, the shadow stuff, don't get too obsessed with it. Like, maybe you only need 10% of your awareness on the shadow, and the rest of your awareness could be on the gift and even the city. Because then you're being aware of the thing that's tripping you up, but you're not obsessing on I've got to pull that weed out. You're just aware of it lightly. And that is enough, actually, because then you pick it up when it comes out. But most of the time you're thinking about actually more positive things. And you're wondering, how can I engage this creativity or this energy in a more positive way? And so you're not negating the shadow, but you're kind of seeing the relationship between the two, because they're two aspects of our nature, like the bit that tries to trip us up, but then the creativity that it's preventing from emerging. So they're one thing, and the it's just a set of tools that, if I'm absolutely honest, it sort of distracts your mind long enough for the miracle to happen. But it does also have a grit to it. That's important, because it doesn't shy away from difficult, material. So it does start with these shadows. Okay. Yeah.
Richard, like many people, I just hopped on the genekeys.com website. I put in my time of birth and everything. And when I got the report, I just thought, I'm not sure. Any system kind of tells me this, tells me that. I don't know. What would you do to someone? I'm glad you used the example of doubt as an issue, who's just doubts that a report based on their birth time.
Yeah, you'll probably see reflected your very view reflected in the words. You might have judgment. You might have, the shadow of you. That may be where you begin things, from that place of suspicion. and that could be a really valuable beginning. You could go, well, if I always begin from suspicion, what is that? Where did that come from? How do I get to the bottom of that? And what's the gift in that? Maybe so if it was judgment, for example, which would, could fit Gene Key 18, it's the other side of integrity, right? So the gift is integrity, because the integrity is I need to make sure this is real and this guy's for real. So I'm going to use this judgment, and but the flip side of the judgment is that it doesn't even want to go there. So it's I'm just going to, I'm not going to go there. Whereas if you open a little bit and see, well, what's hidden in that judgment, because it's a beautiful thing, but it might mean that you just need to soften a little bit into that pattern, open your heart, open your mind, and enter from an empty mind perspective instead of with preconceived ideas of what's going to happen or what you're going to get. I might suggest that you take a more contemplative approach and try and go in a bit more softly, and with a softer attitude, and you might be nicely surprised.
As we conclude our conversation, I want to go back for a moment to the dragonfly and crawling up the grass, the reed, whatever's in the water, getting ready to fly. And if you could talk about what you think that parallel is. And I'm so glad that we're using poetry to talk about this bewildering time that we're in. What you think the actual experience is like for us humans who are I think I'm crawling up the reed. I wonder how Richard would describe that.
Well, it's going into an integrative, transcendent perspective, and that's hard to put into words, but it's about remembering that we are eternal beings, really, or an eternal being. It's about remembering that we are eternal. And it's about approaching something from a state of boundlessness, like a child. Like a child believes that miracles are possible. And that's what that view is like. It's an absolutely soft-hearted, open-minded view of reality. And that's the contemplative approach, actually. And that's what that's what reminds us, in a way, or reveals to us, that we're the love that lies at the heart of everything. So, and then, when you kind of engage that love, it's more than self-love. It's more than, it's, what is it? A kind of universal love. It's the nature of our being. It's the nature of being itself. I think when we start to have flashes of that, then, things, we don't worry so much about the world and the direction of the world, because we realize that that's underneath everything, every single human being, that's under them, that's inside them. And that, yes, they're playing out maybe their shadow pattern on the world stage, and maybe that person over there is playing out their gift, and they're having less impact. But that's love at work in the world, and I think that's the view from the dragonfly. It's the realization of I don't want to sound like a kind of New Age guru or whatever, but it is the realization of the perfection of everything as it is right now. But that sounds trite, but it is actually an experience of love. That's what I experienced in those 3 days, and I carry it with me as a sort of echo. And I've imbued the Gene Keys teachings with it. So it's not really about the teachings or the words or the it's actually in between the words. I'm open about saying it's a trick. It's if you want to be tricked, then this is a great place to come and be tricked into loving yourself. That's really what it is.
Richard Rudd, founder of the Gene Keys. I've loved talking with you.
Thanks,
Thank
Tami.
you so very much. I hope we get another chance, and I'd love to meet you in person sometime.
Likewise.
Give you a big hug. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
And if you'd like to watch Insights at the Edge on video and participate in the after-show Q&A session with our guests, come join us on Sounds True 1, a new membership community featuring award-winning original shows, live classes, community learning, guided meditations, and more with the leading wisdom teachers of our time. Use promo code PODCAST to get your first month free. You can learn more at join.soundstrue.com. Sounds True, waking up the world. The Sounds True Podcast Network.